I'm here with Margot Cronin and Damon Edwards, and we're here to talk about how to get your submission accepted to the DevOps Enterprise Summit conferences. So the goal of the next 30 minutes is for each one of the program committee members to introduce themselves, talk about their experiences with the conferences so far, especially from Margot, who presented at the first London conference last year. And then we'll go through some very specific guidance in terms of the CFP process, how we evaluate submissions, and specific things we're looking for, and specific things that actually we're not looking for. And so my goal, I would be delighted as everyone attending this webinar will actually leave with some concrete tips that will help you actually get your submission accepted, and so that you'll be presenting at DevOps Enterprise in the future. So why don't we start with well, actually, Damon, why don't we start with you, because we've been working together on this conference for 4 years, and then let's go to Margot. Damon.
Yeah, hi, my name is Damon Edwards. I'm one of the co-founders of Simplify Ops, the makers of Rundeck. And yeah, I've been working on this. I was a co-founder, previously was a managing partner of DTO Solutions, a DevOps consultancy. Through that, got to know Gene way back in the day from the first US DevOps days, and been working with him on this this DevOps thing for quite a while, and was proud to be part of the original programming community for the committee for the first DevOps Enterprise Summit, San Francisco. And we've been doing it ever since, and happy to see what it's grown into, and happy to be here to help get people's talks picked.
And I guess you love I think one of the things that you and I share is just a passion for conferences. We're both, as you would say, semi-professional conference attendees, right? You attend a lot of conferences.
I do. I guess where this is leading, I should probably say, is what's different about DevOps Enterprise Summit? Is that you want me to
sure,
to say? I think the difference, I think it's a unique voice and a unique place, which is, if you're in the unicorns, the startup world, you might have a lot of technology problems, growth problems, but you really don't have the interpersonal, interorganizational, really mess that you see in large enterprises, right? I mean, you're talking about the history of success. Companies have been around for, for years, for decades even, and how they have multiple layers of legacy people, process, and tools. They have multiple business units that all need to come together and hang together and to make a cohesive enterprise. So the complexity and the depth of the issues that they have to deal with and transform is quite immense. And I think it's a unique set of people. They have a lot to offer. And I think that focusing on I guess we'd say the technology management, right? The management of technology in these types of organizations is a place where there is not really a home for it today. And I think that's the cool thing about the DevOps Enterprise Summit. I think Margot can, hopefully as an attendee, can echo this, that it's a unique place to make those connections and to really, learn from each other, and for all of us to push the state of the world forward.
Wonderful. In fact, you know what? Let me actually explicitly describe what the DevOps Enterprise Summit is all about. It's really intended to be a conference for technology leaders who are transforming how large, complex organizations deliver software and value to the customers and help win in the marketplace. And so one of the things that I'm so proud of is that we've been able to attract these technology leaders, of which Margot Cronin was one who actually came through the CFP process. So Margot, can you introduce yourself and maybe your experiences through the conferences and what made it unique to you?
Yeah, hi there, Gene. So I think maybe I bring a good balance here, because as you said, you and Damon are experienced conference goers and conference speakers and attendees, and I'm actually right at the other end of the spectrum, namely because I've always worked for enterprises, and they usually don't give me the budget to go to conferences. And so it really, I was so lucky that I had set myself a personal goal to submit some papers to different conferences out there to talk about the experiences I was having. At the time, I was working for Zurich Insurance, and I've also worked in DevOps for Credit Suisse, and submitted an overview of the challenges we were facing. And I'm really, it was not to be cheesy, but it was actually quite a career high for me that I wasn't expecting. So I really encourage people out there, especially the non-experienced conference presenters, to actually look at what they're doing with DevOps with automation in their organizations, and they actually probably have a really interesting story to tell. And so that's why I think this session is quite cool, so we can kind of guide them how to put together the right session to catch our eye. Because, I mean, for me, that was the biggest challenge, knowing that I had a story to tell and that there were other people out there that could both guide me and give me feedback.
Oh, wonderful. And by the way, we loved your presentation so much. We actually invited you to be part of the program committee for the London conference in 2017. So this is delightful. And I can't tell you how thrilled I am that you're helping us actually find, and let me just repeat that just to make sure people didn't miss that. We met through the conference because you had submitted a proposal, right?
Yes. And so, actually, I mean, my submission was a bit chaotic, so I think I was very lucky to get through. And, you know, I'm really looking forward to helping people actually structure their submissions so that they'll actually submit a good presentation.
Brilliant. And then could you talk a little bit about what made the conference uniquely valuable? We were talking before this about the composition of the talks and what specifically was of value to you.
So for me, what distinguished this conference was very much that it was attended and presented by enterprises and by people, my peers out there from other banks and insurance companies and other organizations. I have, you know, there's an awful lot of guidance out there on the vendors, on the startups, on the specific technologies in the stack. But then when you try to deploy it in a large enterprise, the real problems that you face with stakeholders, business units, scaling, trying to actually properly deploy automation, integration, there's not so much. And that was really the highest value. And not only the sessions, but then at the breakout sessions, you got to meet with the unicorns, but also essentially peers in other organizations. And I really kept in touch with many people subsequent to my sessions at DOES 2016. So I really encourage people to reach out and to apply, to submit a paper, to actually meet colleagues and peers that are facing similar challenges.
Ah, awesome. Yeah, in fact, I love this. I mean, like so many things in life, our outcomes are almost the biggest function is our colleagues and collaborators and co-creators, right? That has a disproportionate effect on our outcomes. So and our peer group. So I absolutely agree with you. So let's talk a little bit about how we put together the DevOps Enterprise Summit. Damon, I want to acknowledge so much of your input on this. I mean, this is the output of almost 4 years of collaboration. So the way we've structured the conference, broadly speaking, is 3 types of talks. The first is an experience report, and meaning this is very much what Margot presented, is we're looking for stories of the transformation journey of someone that's actually doing the transformation. And so we specifically want experience reports that can be structured in the following way. Here's our industry that we're competing in. Here's our organization. Here's where I fit into the org chart. Here's the business problem that we set out to solve. Here's what we did. Here's the outcomes. Here's what worked and didn't work. And here's the challenges that still remain. And so the theory behind that is that as adult learners, as leaders, we tend not to learn so much from theory and reading books. Books are great, but we really learn, and it's books about saying what we should do. We learn more from what people say, what they did, right? And we can derive our own learnings from that. So this is the reason why we don't want theory talks for the most part. We really do want stories of transformations for people actually doing the work. There is a second category of talks, though, which are expert talks, which is there's some specific areas that the community says these are our top problem areas. This usually comes from the experience reports from the following year, from the previous year. In the case of San Francisco and London, the US and UK conference, it was around, how do I everyone is on board except for information security and compliance and regulators, right? How do we get them on board? Or how do we create automated testing processes when we have none right now for our legacy applications? Or how do I get my fellow leaders on board, especially the more conservative, reactionary segments? How do I get those people on board, or at least how do I build a coalition, so I can lead change in our organization? Or I'm sure there's a couple others. And so we actually put these into the CFP so that people know what topic areas what we're looking for, and there we're looking for subject matter expert talk. So in the CFP form, there should be a drop-down box that says I'm presenting either an experience report or I'm presenting a subject matter expert talk. So let's talk first about the experience report. I think tip number one there for me is that we're looking for a mandatory component of an experience report is that one of the presenters must be someone inside the enterprise doing the transformation. In other words, we can't have just a consultant presenting a talk about their client. That client that must be there. Same for product companies. We need someone from the customer there. Damon, do you want to talk about that? This is something that we've been very firm on, and that boundary is very clear.
Yeah, and I think the way that I'd set it up is, we've heard this from a couple attendees that one thing they like about the DevOps Enterprise Summit is they feel like they aren't crazy, right? They come to the conference and they say, oh, wow, there's people like me. There's people who have my problems. And the further away that they get from the conference, they said, they start to feel a little crazier. Like, gosh, is this really going to work? Or, am I crazy here? Am I the only one, thinking this way? And then they come to the next year of the conference. They're like, oh, no, good. There's other people that are on my same journey, right? So I think that's kind of the primary point of the experience reports is to number one, let other people know that other people have their problems. It's kind of amazing, how much these problems are reflections of each other across almost any large organization. So that's number one, to kind of share in the experience and to give people some extra color, some extra background, some extra advice. Whether someone's a little bit ahead of them or a little behind them, you can always learn from seeing other people's experiences. So I think that's kind of part one. And then part two of the experience report that really makes it a good experience report is to be specific, right? To the more prescriptive you can be, to say these are the specific techniques that we used. Here's how it went. Here's what didn't work. Here's what did work, and here's where we got to. That's really one of the most important parts. You don't have to have an amazing story that the hockey stick. You started over here, and 18 months later, you're way up over here, in the upper right magic, quadrant. I think really what comes down to is the honest learning, right? That these are the techniques we tried. Here's those techniques or actions look like. Here's what went well. Here's what didn't go well, and here's where it got us. I think those are the most interesting ones. Not that it's the greatest story, right? And I think that's a lot of people who have talked to about their submissions or who actually didn't submit. I said, why didn't you submit? They didn't think their story was exciting enough, right? Or their story was amazing enough. But the reality is, if you talk to them and hear about the techniques they tried and their experience, both good and bad, there's a lot of great, really useful information that's inside almost any organization. So. Please, if you are thinking about submitting an experience report, encourage people to talk about a lot of the mundane things that made your life miserable, and you figured out how to get around. I guarantee there's a lot of people who are being plagued by the same issues and want to hear it from you, even if you don't think it's the most sexy story in the world.
I'll just mention that there's two kind of specific guidance that we have in the CFP. One is in-progress stories are welcome. In fact, we should probably amplify that. We want stories at every part of the journey. In fact, one can say that the most important part of any journey is the beginning, right? So you don't need to have finished. And we also say consultants. We love consultants and vendors. Most of our friends are consultants and vendors, or some of our best friends are consultants and vendors. However, we require that vendor and consultant submissions be led by your customers, your clients. Margot, does that resonate? Which parts resonated with you, and maybe even tell us about the submission, the talk that you gave?
Yeah, no, that really resonates with me, and I think just to emphasize what Damon said there. If anyone listening out there is probably sitting on a really interesting story that real challenges that other organizations are facing. And I mean, I don't know, Jean, if you want to go into it, but I think from previous conferences, you've had enterprises collaborate then outside of the conference, because they've realized, hey, you know what, we're doing the exact same thing and we're facing the same problems. And it's really only through this forum that can actually happen. Because really the information out there on DevOps is very vendor specific and very, very software specific or it's people trying to sell you stuff. And this is the differentiator here. This is not about selling products or not about selling services. So I could really emphasize and agree with what Damon said there. For me, the whole process of submitting last year was so efficient and so easy. I followed the online process and gave a summary of what I wished to talk about. And subsequent to that, I really got a lot of guidance from your team as to the level of detail to go into and actually help develop the story that I subsequently presented. So,
yeah. So, sorry, keep going.
That's it. That's really all I wanted to say. I think for me, the most important message is that it's not necessarily, it is not the unicorns and the super uber engineers necessarily that you're trying to reach out to here, but actually the guy on the ground who has come up with those couple of genius little ideas that he doesn't even realize himself to move the true DevOps story forward in their enterprise.
Actually, so maybe to expose maybe some of our criteria, right? We're looking for someone who's leading the transformation, someone who has a disproportionate impact of like, how do you get organizations to do something they don't want to do, right? And it's been my observation that the job titles cluster around certain areas. You know, there may be a second or third line manager, so that'd be like a director of operations. So, you know, in the maybe non-financial services, it'd be like manager, senior manager, director. So, you know, they're managing 60 to, I'm sorry?
Head of is a common one. Head of technology or head of DevOps. They come up with some great titles.
Yeah, exactly. And so they're leading large teams of teams. And sometimes it's director of development. We've actually had the second most prevalent title has been enterprise architects. We've had some come from security. So even project management. You know, these epiphanies come from. You know, I think we're finding these kind of the people who see the problem before anyone else, and have the courage to drive these transformations and you know, take on, you know, the huge bureaucratic machine, you know, who like an immune system materialized to, you know, say we can't do that. The other thing that I would give as advice is, I think one of our goals is to show that these transformations are possible in every industry vertical. And so if you see that, I'll tell you right now, over the going into the fourth year of the conference, we're still, we never have enough financial services companies. We have never had enough healthcare companies. The more regulated, the more need to be secure, the better, right? So I think the more unlikely the story, I think the more we're actually looking for an experience report from you, because we need to show that DevOps is for every industry vertical, not just, you know, for Google, Amazon, Facebook. Damon, you had some thoughts.
Yeah, I think there's two things I'd like to bring up about the you know, the experience reports. Number one, you know, people learn from the pain, right? Everybody knows that a big problem is when you hear a lot of these stories and they're too rosy. It was too much of we started over here, we went over there, and it was great, right? And everybody knows it's not how anything happens.
It's all because I'm so smart.
Right. It just never happens that way, right? And I think you know, we've had a few organizations where the story comes out too rosy, right? And the best talks and the ones that we're, I think, most likely to pick are the ones that are very upfront about what the failings were, right? Or at least what the problems that they were working on were. And, you know, there's missteps in every organization along the way. And it's not due to really anyone's fault, just like most, you know, DevOps problems. We take kind of a blameless point of view. It's more of a, hey, the conditions we had to try different things before we found a more optimal outcome, right? And I think that the more that you can sell that in your abstract of your submission, the more likely you are to listen to your story. You know, because everyone's got a story of things were bad, now they're great, right? And I want to hear, you know, why were they bad, and sort of what was that jagged line that you got from you know, from where you are to where, you know, to where you are today. And as Gene said, it doesn't really have to be an amazing, you know, transformation. The whole organization is fixed, even if it's minor changes. Sometimes those are breakthroughs that can help you, that's going to set the ground for your success, and is going to help other people as well who are struggling with those problems. So that's, I think, number one for me is in your abstract, talk about the problems, because people want to hear about the problems, and what you did to address them. And if it's sugar coated and rosy, then we're really not that interested, because no, things are, the important parts are being hidden. And then number two, I'd say that, you know, people feel like from their experience reports that they need to be kind of grand and sweeping. And there is sort of that, you know, a place for those kind of epic tales, right? Of the, hey, here's all the different stuff that we did. Here's the sort of broader kind of, you know, omniscient view of the organization and all the stuff we have going on. And that's great. And it establishes precedent, establishes that, hey, look at these, you know, these different industries that are trying these techniques and are seeing some results. But the other part, I think that is a great experience report, is to really drill in, right? To say, hey, here's the broader view. You know, I'm gonna spend a couple minutes on that. But more importantly, let me talk about these 2 or 3 things. Let me talk about these specific techniques or actions that we took. Here's what worked, here's what didn't work, and here's where it got us, because it was important for, you know, for what we're doing, right? So, you know, it could be different, different types of tool chain architecture, different types of organizational structure, how we got, you know, how we manage the financial side of it, or the planning side of it, our budgeting, you know, it could be, you know, how we developed our people, just some specific, you know, technique, drill in and say, I want to give an experience report on how we applied this and this. And here's what went well, here's what didn't work well, and here's what we're going to try next. If you can be very specific like that, that's going to catch our eye as well.
Yeah. By the way, I can. I think we may even. I think that's so important, Damon. In fact, I can tell you right now, like with Margot Cronin's talk, it was dealing with outsourcers. Right? The fact that she did this in, where the majority of, if my memory is correct, it was operations outsourced, and you were still able to achieve dramatic decreases in lead time, right, despite outsourcers, right?
And just to give you feedback on that, when I subsequently went home, and I've been asked to give the talk a couple of times since, what people wanted to know more about was exactly that problem. So I had a 30-minute session. I think I had 2 or 3 slides dedicated to that and to how we solved the problem, and what we were, if we were actually in the process of solving the problem. We hadn't even it fully solved. And since then, it's actually that point that I've drilled into deeper.
Yeah,
So,
and that doesn't surprise me. And it's such a unique story, and it's a problem that's universally felt. So which you did, I think that you presented so vividly on, Polly Comtois from Hearst Media, right? I mean, his was dealing with middle management, right? This is every functional silo manager that then, has a reason, that feels threatened by DevOps transformations. Right. That was that's why we picked that one with Equifax, is about how do you create different funding models so that we can get separated from kind of the shared services, especially around centralized operations.
And I think this is why this point is important. Being able to drill in is important, because a lot of people who have something interesting to say are like, yeah, but I don't really know everything, right? I'm not really the broad view person here. I just worked on this specific piece, right? Or I have this specific point of view. I really had to think hard about the outsourcing problem, right? Or how do we work with all these different outsourced vendors, right? Or Polly's was specifically about how do you deal with middle management. Senior management was bought in. The guys, folks on the ground really saw the problems firsthand. It was sort of the insulated middle management. How do you deal with that, right? You don't need to have the full broad view. If you feel like there's something that you have specific insight on, then please, consider that. And as long as it's about your company and where you're working, turn that into an experience report and, talk about the thing that you have to share. Because no matter how boring your husband or wife thinks that that your stories are, I guarantee you that other people who are in the trenches and other organizations will find that will be like, yes, somebody gets me. I have that problem. Let's talk about this.
Margaret, you had this strong reaction to that.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I'd add not only how boring your husband, wife, and friends find it, but your manager and some of your colleagues as well. I would actually add, because I think that's also one of the biggest challenges. A lot of the questions I got subsequent to the presentation on LinkedIn from people that had attended was how do organizations accept the change and adopt the people within the organization. to support this new organization that has automation and DevOps. So it's very much about the challenges that you face, and it's often not a popular topic. There's no doubt about it.
And by the way, I think there's one of the things I just get endless delight out of is like during the conference, there is a certain gallows humor, right? We all face, it's clear that, those challenges, the apathy, the hostility, the resistance, I mean, it's a common feeling felt by everyone in the room. And I think there's one of the comments I've gotten is that there's something very energizing about going into a group, a community that is fighting the same battle, because you need that energy to continue the fighting battle, when you get back to the office. By the way, Damon and Margaret, I heard something from Jason Cox. I was with him at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security with Topo Powell from Capital One. We were helping Mark Schwartz in help sell DevOps internally inside the U.S. government. And Jason said, even he's been presented for 3 times about the Disney transformation. He said he's always looking for new success stories because he needs that for his own battles at home. So even Jason needs new success stories. Anything else on advice that you would give to people presenting experience reports? Margot, Damon?
You know what? DevOps is a lot about people and teams. And I would say you could maybe partner with somebody on your team and submit a talk as 2 people. That would be also something. I would not, as I said, I'm not the experienced conference goer, so I actually wouldn't have known that was an option open to me. And so that's what I would encourage people to do as well. Look at this problem that you're thinking about writing about. Maybe if you had a colleague you work with, the 2 of you can present together.
Oh, by the way, from a programming committee perspective, there's nothing more intriguing than someone actually co-submitting with someone they had an adversarial relationship with. We've had people present from dev and ops presenting together. We've actually had 2 technical fellows. They presented as competitors in the system integrators. They're often competing with each other from for government contracts. I mean, it was just astonishing. That was 2 technical fellows from Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman. I'll find their names, but I think those are actually things that I would say are a definite asset and things that catch our attention in the program committee. Anything else on that, Damon?
No, other than I think the actual structure of your submission. I think people too little isn't really that good. Some people just submit a few sentences. They kind of, I think, might also sort of feel like their position and title entitles them to us to just to say, think they have something great to say. So, be aware of that you need to detail. Also, some people write, too much. I think you got to imagine that, we're going to be reading these. The more detail, the better. But if you can kind of think and write in bullet points, that would be great. Or think at least kind of have more of a bulleted, structured way of submitting, what you want to talk about when it comes to your experience report. I think that's important for us. We do read a lot of these. So, if you could really kind of dig into what your problems were and, what your solutions were and sort of, where you came from, where you went to, and do so in kind of a bulleted, crisp fashion, that's really going to help, help us.
One of the things that we added to the form, and this is probably how all change request forms kind of, I would hate to think we're creating that, but one of the things that we to make people get more explicit about this is we said, what are the learning objectives that you want people to have, as a result of the talk? Just so that,
why should why should we pick you, and how are people going to learn from your talk, right? I mean, that's the important for us to know, far more so than being an experienced speaker or having a great body of knowledge behind you. All those things are always, or a great body of work you can point to. Those are always nice, but some of the best talks are ones from folks that have never really spoken at a conference before, but have some very specific and interesting advice or experience to give.
Yes. Actually, I just found the talk that caught my attention. So this was a talk by Miss Robin Yemen and Miss Suzette Johnson. Robin Yemen, she's a technical fellow, so one of the top 300 engineers at Lockheed Martin, presenting with an agile coach from Northrop Grumman. And so the fact that we had two competitors actually presenting on their respective journeys, elevating the state of practice for often large-scale weapons procurement programs, and it was just, this was an astonishing submission on so many fronts. And trust me, one of the parts that caught specifically my attention was the fact that they were co-presenting and they came from competitors, and they were both female leaders as well. So that was interesting to me.
Can I say one more thing about the experience report submissions?
Yes.
It's also important that the sorry, I was drawing a blank there. What else I was about to say? I listened to what you were going to say. Yeah, it's been really good. Why don't we push forward and I'll remember what it was. Sorry.
Okay. So that's the experience report format, and I think that's going to be the majority of the talks. In fact, I mean, why do I say that? Because when we start the conference planning process, we actually break down the composition of the talk. So in the case of London, these numbers might be a bit off, but we said we're going to have 21 experience reports, and we're going to have a little over 10 expert talks. And so that number changes over time, but in general, we're going to broadcast out the experience reports. So just numerically speaking, right, if you want a talk accepted, there's going to be more openings on the experience report side. But there's actually, for subject matter talks, we're actually going to be actively seeking out the best experts in the game. So on automated testing, on security, on leading change. And so the bar is in some ways higher for the subject matter expert talks. Damon, you said this. I think you said this very eloquently. Why is the bar higher for the subject matter expert talks?
Well, I think the bar is, why is the bar higher? I think the bar is higher because on the experience report, you really just had to be there, right? I think the experts, and be able to relate the tale, right? Relate the story and explain what worked and didn't work, and have some insight into it, obviously. But the most important part is just relating the experience, right? Saying this is what we tried. This is what happened. This is why we think it did or didn't happen. And here's where we are today, and here's where we're going to try next, right? That's raconteur. It is really.
And Damon is starting to break up. So to complete his thought, for the subject matter expert talk, what we're looking for are the experts that everybody would say that person is probably one of the top experts in the field.
Yes.
So in some ways, yes, you're back.
Okay, back. Yeah. So right. So I'd say, well, the experience reports, it's important that your primary qualifications that you're there and can tell the story. The expert talk, where we're looking for people who are foremost experts in their field and really have a specific technique to teach, and in 30 minutes or so can get into great depth. And so we're looking for very much proven quantities, right? People who are known, who they have experience to point to, they have an expertise that we can, verify and that would be, universally accepted. So, we're really looking for people who have a specific technique to teach, and it's almost like a mini class, right? That's the way we would look at it.
Can I just say as an attendee as well, that it was really a great balance then at the breakout sessions, and also, to be honest with you, at the evening sessions as well, because you got to talk to people from other enterprises. Then there was the unicorns, and then there were these experts, and it was really just a great mix of attendees and speakers as a result. Yeah,
and here is where if you take a look at the kind of the experts we've chosen in the past, one of them was Bill Shin, right? He helps lead the security and compliance practice for all of Amazon Web Services, right? So he's coming from a vendor, but this is expertise that he's one of the best in the game. We had Mark Imbriaco. He was a former head of operations for GitHub, 37 Signals, Heroku, GitHub, right? So he's now has a startup, but again, he's widely acknowledged as one of the best in the game. One of the people that we had invited, but fell apart at the last minute, was John Allspaw to the San Francisco conference. Who's the co-author of the famous Allspaw Hammond presentation that really kicked off the DevOps movement. We put Patrick Dubois up there. We had Gareth Rushgrove, who is now at Puppet, but for years he was part of the UK Digital Services community. So he told some of that experience. So the speakers will look a little different, but and we loosen and there the restrictions don't apply because often these people will be consultants, specializing in that one area that we're looking to provide that expertise to everybody in the community. So feel free to, of course, you can submit a subject matter expert talk, but then there you will really want to make sure that in your submission, all of the reviewers, myself included, will, if we don't recognize your name, you'll put down all the qualifications to really prove to us that you are one of the best thinkers in those areas. And again, we're look for where the problem areas that you match it to one of the problem areas, whether it's automated testing, security, etc. Security, in fact, in general, right now, that's always a good one. So if you're good at that, get your submission in there. Anything else you want to talk about in terms of subject matter expert talks?
I mean, I think just be specific, right? You got to have, if you're submitting an expert talk, it's 30 minutes. You're really talking about one thing, right? And one thing really well. So, be highly specific. Otherwise, it's going to get rejected.
I would say think about your audience. It's predominantly chief architects and technology leaders from large enterprises. What are they interested in?
That's actually a very good point. Even though the expert talks, I think, can kind of be all over the place, we're just looking for the most relevant topics. Now I remember what I was going to say about the experience reports, which is true for right. Yeah, is that they have to be DevOps stories, right? And that's kind of the important thing, that this is not, there's great conferences like Velocity for like web operations, right? Or shade it now to more of an enterprise architecture type focus. There's the QCons and those kind of conferences are great for, development specific, topics. But this is really a DevOps, an organizational transformation conference, right? We're really talking about technology leadership, whether it's team leaders up to, full organizational, enterprise organizational leaders. It's leading technology organizations, to improve how they work and improve their organizations that they're within. So make sure that your talks are DevOps related or organizational related, or kind of, aren't just an agile dev talk or aren't just a, infrastructure automation talk, right? But it addresses the, dev and ops conundrum that and silos that these organizations are facing. So when it comes to expert talks, think about that too, that, we don't want talks that people are just going to see at other conferences. We want talks that are very specific to this, broader domain.
Awesome. And I think the last piece of concrete advice to anyone submitting is kind of how important it is for vendor neutrality. I cannot tell you how proud I am, that so many people have come up to me and said, this is the first conference I've been to where I haven't been pitched all day long. And I think all of us know that feeling of being at a conference and you see just a great talk, and then someone comes on the stage and then you get pitched, and then maybe multiple times, all day, maybe even all day long. And so our goal is to have this to be a vendor neutral community. Damon put it really well, right? A good guideline is, you shouldn't, other people should be able to replicate the outcomes being talked about without having to rely on a one specific consultant or one specific technology. And so, and I think that's something that we hold a very high standard to, and not to say that there haven't been some leakers, but in general, I think we've held a very high standard for, vendor neutrality and, not inflicting pitches on the conference attendees, for the entire conference. So what this means is that this almost invalidates, a significant portion of the talks that we have to evaluate, which are talks saying, hey, here's two types of talks that we try to shoot down in the very first phase, which is, here's why DevOps is important. The fact that people are coming to this conference says that they already understand why DevOps is important. We're actually looking for more of the how talk. So we don't need to be convinced why DevOps is important, unless there's a very unusual twist, right? So unlike Simon Sinek, who always says, let's start with why, I think we're done with the why. We're really looking for the next step, which is the how, because that's how we learn. And the second category of talks that we decline right away are the ones where it's just it's a vendor just talking about the capabilities. and we just can't, in general, 90% of these, there's nothing defensible in them. Sometimes we'll recover a couple of them out just because there's a kernel of something interesting. But in general, if it sounds like DevOps is important and here's a specific capability that we provide, those will be turned down. Any other red flags? I'll refer to you, Damon, and maybe Margot. Some things that Margot will be part of the program committee for the first time. We haven't kicked off the process yet, but if you have any thoughts on that, Margot, I'd be interested. And Damon, any memories from the last 3 years?
I'd say also the PR submission, the PR firm submissions. I think it's if the person doesn't. I mean, just personally, I feel like if the person doesn't have time to submit their own talk, then they probably don't have time to prepare and time to be a great, thoughtful speaker and participant in the community. So I know this is something from almost every conference, that at least the ones I respect, that saying that the PR submitted talks are just not there, right? And it's just so that's, I think, part of it. It also goes along with the vendor things that Gene said. I think that there's plenty of vendors who have spoken at this conference who have done a great job, and there's two ways to do it. One of them is you can be an experience support, but that case you're really just there to support or kind of co-present along with the primary customer, the end user. And again, it has to be open and transferable knowledge, transferable skills. The other is an expert talk, right? But the bar is very, very high there. And if you're a vendor submitting an expert talk, the bar is going to be very high for you. But there's those who who do a good job of presenting and saying, I'm going to talk about a open and transferable set of skills, and we have to know a lot about this because our organization does a lot of this, or it's part of the belief that we use to to build our products. But the bar is much higher there. So don't feel totally discouraged if you're a vendor or consultant. Just kind of follow that guidance.
Absolutely, and I guess to be in full candor, right? We've all been in points of our lives where we're selling something, right? So there's nothing against vendors or consultants. It's just very, as Damon said, open and transferable. I guess, Margot, I mean, hopefully those were our objectives as we went through the selection process. I'm just hoping and praying that this is actually what came across, when you were as a speaker and attendee for DevOps Enterprise 2016 London.
Yeah, I mean, having gone through the process, I will just say to anyone out there that it's a very positive experience, and that subsequent to my submission, I heard from someone in your committee at the time who said, these are the kernels that we're interested in, and this is why we're going to follow up with you. And I was able to then expand the talk based on that. So I really want just to encourage those leaders out there who are thinking, oh, you know what, maybe my story about the business units, about the people integration, this is boring. I really want to encourage them to actually try and submit.
Because it's not boring to us. Quite the opposite.
Exactly. And back to your kind of why and how thing, I think what was one of the interesting things from the session last year was how many of us were at the same stage in our how journey. We're like, a lot of us were like 1 to 2 years in of what could feasibly be a 5-year journey. And, I really want to kind of emphasize that it's important to submit at the point that you're at. And Gene, you asked me a great question about the session, and that was to also mention what I needed help in. And I think that was also something that helped give some great structure to my submission.
Oh, great. And in fact, and this is, maybe say it more explicitly, we use that information. And when people say, here's what I don't know how to do, here's what I'm looking for help with, we use that to frame the next year's programming agenda, right? So that's what will go into the CFP. So, it's funny, as we go through all this guidance, almost all of this does exist in the CFP. So, here's really, 45 minutes and more fidelity of why that's in the CFP, and really motivating, if you want your submission accepted, this is why you should follow those guidelines. I guess that really covers what I was hoping to get. Is there any last thoughts or words from you, Margot, or Damon? And then, actually, wait, before I go there, timelines. The CFP is open, and Jeremy, I know you're out there. Can you actually rattle off all of the details as I'm looking forward to here?
Yeah, so the call for papers for London has just opened today, and that will be open until early February. So everyone will have around a full month to get their submissions in for the London event.
Holy cow, we don't have much time. Very good. And the conference is, we have a date selected?
Yeah, June 5th and 6th in London.
In London. Okay, great. So the two takeaways are there is a CFP form up, and you will, where do they find that, Jeremy?
We can share that link with everyone directly after this video chat.
It will be
essentially events.itrevolution.com.
Okay, events.itrevolution.com. The CFP is open, and you have about 30 days to get your submissions in. So that should be the takeaways. Use all this information to get your submissions in. So all I can say is we're heading into the 4th year of the DevOps Enterprise Summit, our 2nd year in London. I am so thrilled with all the people, the great people I've been able to meet, including Margot, Ron von Caminada, the CIO of ING Bank, and all the other great speakers that we had. And I'm looking forward to working with Margot and Damon, John Willis, a bunch of other great people to help DevOps Enterprise London the 2nd year even better than the 1st year. But we can't do that, obviously, without submissions from you all out there. So with that, any closing words, Margot and Damon?
No, looking forward to all the submissions and seeing everybody in London.
Very good. Margot?
Yeah, looking forward to London. It was a really great conference last year. It's a really great size and really great attendees. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your late evening, Margot, and early morning, Damon. So thank you so much. Jeremy, I'll turn it over to you to wrap up.
Great. Thanks, Gene, and thank you, everybody. You have a good day. And for more information, just go to events.itrevolution.com.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.